All right, you can go ahead and say hi.
Hello.
Hi.
Listen carefully. America is in danger. Currently, we're facing an existential threat, and its name is ignorance. Today, I'm going to teach you about the historical development of a powerful legislative mechanism, and its name is the filibuster. If you give me your attention, you'll leave here with a better understanding of the legislative process, and in turn, that will help protect America from an uninformed citizenry. My name is Alex Wellington. I've studied political science and I've done research on this topic thoroughly. In order to understand the contemporary filibuster, we must walk through 4 stages: the foundational rules of the Senate, the elimination of deliberative time restrictions, the simple majority requirements, and the nuclear option. Let's start with the Senate. So, with Article 1 of the United States Constitution, the Founding Fathers conceived the upper chamber of our legislature. Its responsibilities are to create laws, assess the tax code, and confirm judicial appointments. Also with Article 1, the Senate was given the power to create their own rules to govern their proceedings. According to 2 authors from the Stanford Law Review, this created a bit of an ambiguity, and it caused a situation in which debate could last forever or indefinitely. And it could only be ended by a mechanism referred to as a motion for the previous question. Now that we have an understanding of the early Senate rules regarding debate, let's look at a change to them that accidentally created the filibuster. This pertains to the elimination of deliberative time restrictions. Now, in 1806, Vice President Aaron Burr suggested that the Senate clean their rule book and eliminate redundancies. Specifically, he singled out a motion for the previous question. According to Sarah Binder of the Brookings Institute, this eliminated the Senate's ability to end debate. So there was no longer a mechanism to force senators to vote. Theoretically, debate could go on forever so long as somebody kept speaking. So this, as a consequence, created the filibuster. Now, filibuster refers to the act of a senator debating a legislative matter merely for the purpose of delaying its vote and ultimately trying to prevent its passage. The longest filibuster in United States history, according to Walt Hickey of the Business Insider, was given by Strom Thurmond of South Carolina in an attempt to kill the Civil Rights Act of 1957. Ultimately, it failed, but he spoke for 24 hours. Now, this should be self-evident to every American of every race, of every sexual orientation, of every gender, as to why you ought to be informed about the filibuster, because it literally has the power to cause or obstruct your freedom from discrimination. And senators realize the volatility of this of the filibuster as well, and that's why this next stage is seen as an attempt to correct their mistake, and it pertains to the supermajority requirement. So, as senators realized that small political factions could weaponize the filibuster to defeat large bipartisan initiatives, they realized they had a problem because it was hard to get things done. And according to Vox, everything came to a boiling point in 1917 amidst World War I, when the President Woodrow Wilson asked the Senate to authorize military action. When a small group of senators refused to do so, he became infuriated and demanded that they go back to the foundational rules of the Senate. After gaining public support, the Senate decided to compromise, and they implemented a 2/3 vote, also known as a supermajority, to end a filibuster, thus ending debate. This is a mechanism referred to as cloture. Cloture basically can be thought of a way to close debate and cause a vote. The next, in 1970s, they had to change the rule again, because after performances like Strom Thurmond's day-long fiasco, they realized they needed another change. And this change was, they decided that senators no longer had to physically debate, they just had to threaten a filibuster in order to hold up a vote. Now, this saved some time to do other senatorial work, But ultimately, it made it way easier to filibuster, and that became a problem because in 1975, once again, they had to change the rules to lower the threshold to invoke a cloture. According to the report by the Federalist Society, this was called Rule 22, and it ended up being a 3/5 majority. So with the establishment of Rule 22, we were almost to where the filibuster exists today. Today, amidst this new explosion and partisanship, the filibuster has been used way more. So they've implemented a new regulation called the nuclear option. Now the nuclear option, according to Vox, basically means the filibuster no longer applies to judicial nominations. So in 2013, a Democratic Senate applied this to the district federal courts, and in 2017, a Republican Senate applied it to the Supreme Court. As of 2020, numerous presidential candidates have called to go nuclear altogether, which means they want to get rid of the filibuster entirely. It's become a debate of whether it's more important to restore the Senate's productivity or to ensure that the minority party has any power. And at last, we finished the historical development of the filibuster. Now remember, everything we learned can be broken down into 4 stages. The first stage would be the foundational rules of the Senate, followed by the elimination of deliberative time restrictions, then the supermajority requirement, and the nuclear option. So now that I've equipped you with this knowledge, I encourage you to go out and inform others and to make a decision about what the future of the filibuster should be. I'm confident that as long as we can shed our ignorance and open the door for discussion, that the survival of the United States is certain. Thank you. Now, I'd like to open up this time for any questions that you guys might have.
I had a question. What on earth did Strom Thurmond talk about for 24 hours? How did he actually talk that long?
So basically, in my research, I found that Strom Thurmond talked about a lot of things, a lot of which were kind of irrelevant to the passage of the 1957 Civil Rights Act. But one thing that he did do was read the voting rights of all 50 states. And I don't know if you've read constitutions before, but they can be pretty lengthy. Also, a fun fact about Strom Thurmond was during his filibuster, he had one of his staffers have a bucket by the side just in case he needed to use the bathroom. And I don't think he ended up needing to use it, but I guess that's just an example of how extreme the filibuster got at some point.
Awesome.
I have a question. So, from what I heard, does the Senate have to make a vote in order to have a vote?
It depends. So, technically, no. A senator can introduce a legislation, or there could be a judicial appointment, and nobody invokes filibuster, and then it can pass with a simple 51 senator vote majority. But usually, in actuality, what happens is something is introduced, and then 1 out of 100 senators invokes a filibuster, and then you have to surpass that current Rule 22 3/5 majority before you can pass a legislation with the 51 vote majority. If that makes sense. That makes sense?
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Any other questions?
What is the, I guess, difference? I think the term was cloture.
The difference
like
between cloture and filibuster?
Well, how does that fit in, I guess, in terms of what you were telling us about filibuster and before moving to, I guess, nuclear, which is where we're at now?
Okay, so a cloture, which is still part of the filibuster process now. Basically, what a filibuster or a cloture does is it closes a filibuster. So if you can think of debate as a synonym for filibuster, it closes debate, and it allows for a vote on the legislation or in a judicial appointment to ensue. Although that's no longer the case as of 2017.
One more question. Why do you think the filibuster, I guess the elimination of the filibuster, is so impactful into the impact that it had on the Supreme Court justice selection?
Okay, so the nuclear option. Well, basically, historically, the Supreme Court, they are the highest power in the land. So, typically, they've had to appeal to both sides of the political aisle, so Republicans and Democrats. And now with the nuclear option and the elimination of the requirement to appeal to both sides, judges can now not, they don't have to appeal to both sides, I guess, of the political aisle, which can be problematic because then they may make rulings that don't reflect upon the broader population's wants. Makes sense?
It makes sense. Thank you.
Any other questions? Alright, thanks
Thank
for
you.
being here.